The band had just begun playing the second song when my mother's voice sliced through the laughter. "Sweetheart," she said loudly enough for half the hall to hear, "you don't mind if your sister takes the car, do you?" She took my gift before I could even unwrap it, but she had no idea what else was waiting on that table. "Don't blink. You'll want to see the moment." Everyone in the room went silent. For a moment even the air stopped moving. My fingers froze around my glass, the champagne bubbling silently beneath the rim. The photographer who'd been snapping pictures of guests clinking glasses hesitated mid-click. Tessa giggled beside her, eyes sparkling with the same pride she wore every time she took something that wasn't hers. "It suits me better anyway," she said, flicking her hair like she was already posing next to my car. The hall went quiet in waves, laughter dimming, whispers fading, only the soft clatter of forks left behind. I didn't look at her. I didn't need to. I'd known this tone since childhood, the soft cruelty that hid behind Mom's smile. I placed the glass on the table carefully, the way you handle something fragile that isn't worth keeping anymore. "Of course, Mom," I said calmly. She's always had a good eye for other people's things. A few guests laughed nervously, unsure if I was joking. My mother's smile stiffened. Tessa's grin faltered for a breath, then returned stronger. It was 7:42 p.m. I remember because the golden light from the chandeliers hit my wedding ring just right, scattering across the tablecloth like broken sunlight. My husband's aunt was whispering to someone about how classy the reception looked. I wanted to tell her that class was the first thing missing in this family, but I smiled instead. I'd learned long ago that silence speaks louder when people are watching. The evening carried on like a stage play, everyone pretending they didn't hear what they just heard. The band resumed. Glasses clinked. The laughter returned, too loud, too forced. But beneath all of it I felt the pulse of my heart, steady, patient, waiting. Tessa danced near the stage, her dress shimmering silver under the lights. Mom stood near her, eyes full of pride that never once looked my way. The same pride she'd saved only for her beautiful younger one. I excused myself quietly and walked toward the corner of the hall where my purse sat on a chair. Inside, tucked neatly between a folded handkerchief and my lipstick, was a sealed envelope. Cream paper, gold lining, my handwriting across the front. I ran my finger over the edge, feeling the faint pressure of the wax seal beneath it. People assumed I carried it for sentimental reasons, maybe a letter from Dad. No one ever guessed it was something that would turn their world inside out. I looked at it for a long second, then slipped it back inside. Not yet. Timing is everything, and revenge, when quiet, must arrive dressed as grace. The smell of vanilla cake drifted from the dessert table. Children ran past me chasing balloons. The DJ switched songs and my husband waved me over, but I gestured that I'd join him in a moment. My focus stayed on my mother, who was now showing Tessa something on her phone, maybe photos of the car they'd just gifted. I could almost hear them laughing. I'd bought that car myself years ago, working overtime while caring for Mom after Dad's surgery. I still remembered the first night I drove it home. She'd said, "It's nice, but you know your sister deserves something like this one day." She'd said it so casually, like destiny came with her approval. Now here we were, the prophecy fulfilled. The room shimmered with soft lights, but I could feel the heat behind my ribs. It wasn't anger. It was focus, cold, precise. I'd stopped getting angry years ago. It never changed anything. But planning did. A cousin came over, smiling wide. "Congratulations again, sweetie. You and Daniel look perfect together." "Thank you," I said. "It's a beautiful evening." She nodded. "And your mother? Goodness, she's glowing tonight." I smiled. Yes, she always glows when she takes something that isn't hers. Her smile froze for a heartbeat, then she excused herself quickly. That's how it always was. People felt the tension, but no one wanted to name it. I watched my mother walk toward me with a glass of wine. "Don't look so serious, darling," she said softly. "It's just a car. You've got a husband now. You'll have everything you want." I looked her straight in the eye. "I already do," I said. Something flickered across her expression. A shadow of confusion, maybe even unease. But she covered it quickly with that same polished smile. Behind her, Tessa leaned against the table, her arm linked with her new boyfriend's, whispering something that made him laugh too hard. I watched her for a moment, so sure, so smug, and wondered how she'd look when the laughter stopped. The band started a slow song. Couples filled the floor. My husband reached for my hand, but I hesitated, Not because I didn't want to dance, but because something inside me said not yet. I excused myself again and went to the restroom mirror. My reflection looked calm, almost peaceful. My veil caught a trace of light, and for the first time I saw not a bride, but a woman about to end a long injustice with quiet precision. When I came back, the music had shifted again, louder, upbeat. The dessert table had been cut open. People cheered as the cake was brought forward. I walked back to the main table, every step measured. The envelope pressed gently against the inside of my purse. My mother waved me over, smiling for the cameras. "Come dear, we're taking family photos." I stood beside her, Tessa on her other side. Flash. Another flash. "Now one with just the sisters," the photographer said. I turned toward Tessa and she leaned close, whispering, "Don't pout, dear. It's your big night and my lucky one." My hand brushed against the purse again. And I thought. As the night deepened, the crowd began to thin. My husband was talking to his uncle near the exit. I saw Mom gather a few guests, laughing about how generous we were. That's when I walked back to the table, slow, unhurried. I reached into my purse and brought out the envelope. The gold lining caught the light. For a second it looked like something precious, something worth stealing. Mom noticed and turned, her smile widening. "Oh, another gift? You didn't have to." Tessa tilted her head, curious. "What's that?" I placed it on the table between them. "Something you both forgot." Their laughter faltered. The band was still playing, but it sounded distant now, like music from another room. Around us, a few people had stopped talking. The air grew heavier, quieter. I could feel my pulse, not fast, just deliberate, like counting down. "Go ahead, Mom," I said softly. "You've always loved surprises." She hesitated. "What is this?" "Open it," I said. Her fingers trembled slightly as she slid the paper out. Tessa leaned closer, trying to peek. I watched, not saying another word. She unfolded the first line, her eyes widening just enough to betray her composure. Then she looked at me. And for the first time that night, maybe the first time in years, she didn't have anything to say. The lights above flickered once, and I felt the faintest breeze from the air vent sweep across my neck. Someone dropped a fork nearby. Sounded like thunder. "Everything okay?" a guest called from the next table. I smiled faintly. "Perfect," I said. My mother lowered the paper slowly, her mouth parting as if to speak, but she didn't. Tessa stared at her, confused. "What is it?" Mom shook her head. "Not now." I leaned in just enough for only them to hear. "You asked if I'd mind, remember?" I smiled. "You might want to read the rest before answering." Then I straightened my dress, turned toward the dance floor, and walked away as the music shifted again, soft, trembling notes of a song that sounded almost like victory. Behind me, the whispers started again, low and uncertain. The envelope lay open on the table, the first few words visible under the warm light. But I didn't turn back. Not yet. But I could feel the weight of their silence pressing against my back like 100 eyes that suddenly forgot how to blink. The music played faintly behind me. Slow, uncertain, as if even the pianist sensed something wasn't right. My steps felt heavy and light all at once. Every sound, every clink of glass, every breath, seemed sharper now. I could still picture the envelope lying there under the glow of the chandeliers, open and quiet, its contents whispering everything I hadn't said in years. I reached the far end of the hall, just beside the curtain that led to the garden terrace. Cool air slipped through the gap, carrying the faint scent of night jasmine. I breathed it in, trying to steady my heart. It wasn't racing. It was too calm for that. The kind of calm that comes after you've already lost too much to be afraid. Behind me, I heard my mother's chair move. The screech of its legs scraped through the silence. Then came her voice, soft, shaky, stripped of its practiced confidence. "What is this?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. That letter wasn't written to start a conversation. It was written to end one. My husband, Daniel, noticed the tension and walked toward me. "Everything all right?" he asked softly. I forced a small smile. "Yes. I just needed some air." He looked over my shoulder toward the main table where my mother and sister now stood frozen. "Your mom looks pale." "She'll be fine," I said quietly. "It's just a bit of truth catching up to her." He frowned, not understanding. I didn't explain. Daniel was kind, too kind for this kind of war. He came from a family that didn't weaponize love, didn't keep ledgers of affection or ownership. He'd never understand what it meant to grow up competing for permission to exist. The terrace was almost empty, just 2 servers clearing glasses and a few guests taking pictures under the fairy lights. I leaned against the railing, watching the faint reflection of myself in the glass doors. My veil caught the wind, brushing softly against my shoulders. Thought about my father. He would have hated this night. The noise, the vanity, the pretense. He liked quiet dinners, soft laughter, the kind of honesty that didn't need an audience. The last time I saw him, he'd looked tired, not from illness but from disappointment. He'd said, "When I'm gone, promise me you won't fight over things." I'd smiled. "We won't." But he hadn't smiled back. He knew better. A sudden movement caught my eye. Tessa stepping out from the hall, her face flushed with anger. "So that's your big wedding gift?" she hissed. "Embarrassing us?" I turned slowly. Her silver dress shimmered under the garden lights, but the softness in her tone was gone. It was brittle now, all edges. "You embarrassed yourself," I said calmly. She took a step closer, voice trembling. "You think that piece of paper means anything? Mom says it's not real. You probably forged it." I looked at her for a long moment. "You should ask Mom why her lawyer's signature is on it, then." Her lips parted, not in shock but disbelief that her usual tactics weren't working. She'd always been the performer. I'd been the audience. "Not tonight. You think you're smarter than everyone," she spat. "No," I said, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "Just quieter." The sliding door opened again. Mom came out this time, holding the letter in her trembling hand. The paper looked small against her polished nails. "You shouldn't have done this," she said. Her voice was no longer commanding. It cracked on every other word. "Done what?" I asked softly. "Humiliated us, your family, in front of everyone." I let out a slow breath. "Funny. You never called me family when you handed my things to her." Her jaw tightened. "You've always been too sensitive. And you've always been too proud," I said. We stood there face to face. A mother and daughter bound by everything that had gone wrong between them. The sounds from the hall faded. It felt like the world had narrowed to just us 3. The giver, the taker, and the one who finally stopped asking. Tessa tried to snatch the letter from Mom's hand, but I caught her wrist midair. "Careful," I whispered. "You might tear your inheritance." Her eyes widened, but I didn't let go. I wanted her to see my face. Not angry, not cruel, just done. That kind of quiet unsettles people more than shouting ever could. "Dad wrote this before he died," I said. "He made sure it was notarized. He knew what you 2 were doing with the accounts." Mom's hand flew to her mouth. "That's not true." "Then why," I asked, "is his lawyer's copy sealed with the same mark?" Her fingers trembled so badly she nearly dropped the letter. I leaned closer. "He called me the week before he passed. Said he was changing things. Said he finally saw what I couldn't say." For a moment all 3 of us stood in silence. Only the sound of a distant song and the faint hum of the garden lights. "Why tonight?" Mom whispered finally. "You could have done this any other day." "Because tonight," I said, "you made sure the whole world watched you take something that wasn't yours again." Tessa laughed. A high nervous sound. "You're overreacting as usual. It's just a car." I smiled faintly. "No, Tessa. It's never been about the car." Her laughter faded. "It's about every time you borrowed something and never returned it. Every time you took credit for what I did. Every time Mom looked at you and saw perfection and looked at me and saw obligation." Tessa's eyes darted to Mom, who suddenly found the floor more interesting than either of us. Daniel appeared at the doorway, uncertain whether to interrupt. "Is everything all right?" he asked again, this time more firmly. I turned toward him, my voice steady. "It will be." He looked between us, sensing the weight of old wounds he couldn't name, then quietly stepped back inside. Mom's voice broke the silence again. "You've ruined this night." "No," I said gently. "I've reclaimed it." A group of guests peeked from the doorway, pretending to check their phones but clearly watching. My aunt whispered something to another woman. They both turned away quickly when I met their eyes. It didn't bother me. Let them watch. People always loved a scandal when it wasn't theirs. Mom exhaled shakily, her tone softening. "I did what I thought was best. Tessa needed more help. You were always strong, always independent. So you took advantage of it," I finished. You called it love because guilt sounded too honest. Her expression cracked for just a second. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, I said. You raised 2 daughters. One to be adored, the other to be useful. Tessa crossed her arms, trying to regain her confidence. So what now? You think people will side with you? You look petty, you know that. I almost laughed. Maybe. But the difference is I have proof. She blinked. Proof of what? I gestured toward the envelope. That everything you own still has my name attached to it. She frowned, not fully grasping the meaning, and that was exactly how I wanted it. Confusion first, realization later. A soft wind blew, lifting the edge of my veil. The lights flickered once more, and I could hear the faint hum of the generator outside. Somewhere inside, someone clapped. Maybe for the band, maybe just to break the tension. Mom folded the letter and held it tight, her knuckles white. You've made your point, she said coldly. No, I replied, my voice calm. I've just begun it. Her eyes widened. For a moment I saw something unfamiliar in them. Not anger, not disappointment, but fear. I turned to leave, then paused. You said I shouldn't embarrass the family in public, I said softly. But sometimes the truth has to be seen before it's believed. As I walked back inside, the hall seemed brighter somehow. Or maybe it was just my chest feeling lighter for the first time in years. The whispers followed me, but they didn't sting anymore. They sounded like the closing of a door. Daniel reached for my hand. What happened? I smiled. Just a family matter finally settled. He studied me for a second, then nodded, trusting my quiet. That's what I loved about him. He didn't need explanations to believe in me. Across the hall, I caught a glimpse of Mom and Tessa standing near the exit. Mom's head was lowered. Tessa was arguing quietly, gesturing toward the letter like it was poison in her hand. And for the first time I didn't feel small watching them. I didn't feel invisible. Felt equal. No, stronger. The envelope had done more than expose the truth. It had shifted the weight of years. The band began another song, soft and slow. I let Daniel lead me to the dance floor. As we moved, I caught one last glimpse of them walking out the door. The letter still clutched tightly, the truth chasing them into the night. And though I didn't smile, a small, quiet peace settled in my chest. Because for once, the story wasn't theirs to tell anymore. The song was still playing when I felt Daniel's hand gently guide me across the dance floor. His touch steadied me, but my thoughts were far from the music. My eyes drifted toward the empty doorway where my mother and sister had disappeared. The night had swallowed them whole, and yet, it felt as if they were still standing right behind me, breathing down my neck like old ghosts that refused to leave. The lights shimmered softly against the polished floor, and the crowd swayed in rhythm. I smiled when someone passed by with a camera, but inside I was replaying everything. Every birthday forgotten, every compliment redirected, every quiet humiliation wrapped in motherly advice. As Daniel spun me gently, I caught sight of our reflection in the glass windows. 2 people dancing, one smiling, one remembering. I had waited years for this moment, and now that it had come, it felt heavier than I'd imagined. When the song ended, Daniel kissed my hand. You okay? He whispered. I nodded. Just thinking how long this night has been coming. He smiled, unaware how literal those words were. As the guests began leaving, I stepped outside for air. The garden lights had dimmed, the wind cooler now. The scent of jasmine mixed with the faint aroma of extinguished candles. I leaned against the railing, clutching the edge of my shawl, watching the last few cars pull away. I thought I'd feel relief, but what I felt was release. Like I had finally unshackled something that had been chained inside me for decades. I remembered being 8 years old, sitting on the stairs while my parents argued in the next room. Dad had bought me a second-hand dollhouse, cracked at the roof but beautiful to me. The next day it was in Tessa's room. She'll take better care of it, Mom had said. You're too careless. That line followed me my whole life. You're too careless. It was said when I got my first job, when I saved for my own car, when I paid half the house bills after Dad's surgery. Every time I gave, they found a way to make it my fault. But I wasn't careless. I was quiet. And quiet women remember everything. The wooden door creaked behind me. I turned and saw Aunt Marie walking out, her shawl wrapped tightly. I didn't want to intrude, she said gently. But I saw your mother's face earlier. I smiled faintly. Yes, it was quite the picture. She hesitated. Your father used to tell me you were the one who kept him steady. Her words caught me off guard. He said that. Oh yes, she said, nodding. He worried about how your mother handled things. He told me once, if fairness had a face, it'd be my eldest. I felt something shift inside me, a warmth I hadn't felt in years. Aunt Marie touched my hand softly. You did the right thing tonight. Sometimes silence stops being noble and starts being permission. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I was tired of giving permission. She smiled sadly, then turned to leave. He'd be proud of you. Her words lingered long after she was gone. I went back inside. The staff was clearing tables. The flowers that had looked so perfect earlier were starting to wilt under the warm lights. I stood there watching the remnants of the night. The discarded napkins, the half-empty glasses, the echoes of laughter that had already turned to memory. This was how everything in my family worked. Beautiful from afar, hollow when the lights dimmed. My phone buzzed in my hand. A message. Unknown number. You shouldn't have done that. You'll regret it. No name, but I didn't need one. Tessa always thought she was subtle. I stared at the message, then typed back. I already did. For 30 years. Then I blocked the number. The act was small, a single press of a button, but it felt monumental. Daniel came over, jacket in hand. Everyone's leaving. Should we go? Almost, I said, glancing toward the main table where the envelope had been. It was gone. Of course it was. Mom never left evidence behind, not even emotional ones. Can you give me a minute? I asked. He nodded and went to start the car. I walked over to where the table stood. Only a faint ring from my glass remained, the surface damp from condensation. I placed my hand over it, tracing the circle. It felt like closure, an unspoken full stop. Then I noticed something, a small folded napkin tucked beneath the centerpiece. My name written on it in Mom's handwriting. My pulse steadied as I opened it. It said one line. You'll regret crossing blood. No signature. No apology. Just a threat disguised as pride. I folded the napkin slowly and slipped it into my clutch. Not out of fear but proof. Because if there's one thing I learned in this life, it's that people always reveal their truth when they think you've already lost yours. We drove home in near silence. Daniel talked about how beautiful the ceremony had been. I nodded, smiling when I needed to. Outside the car window, the city lights blurred into streaks of gold and white. When we pulled into the driveway, I looked at my house, small, quiet, peaceful. Nothing like my mother's sprawling one, where every corner echoed her control. Inside, I removed my veil and jewelry, placing each piece neatly on the dresser. Daniel kissed my forehead. You sure you're okay? I'm perfect, I said, meeting my reflection in the mirror. For the first time in my life, I'm perfect. He smiled, turned off the light and went to bed. But I stayed awake, sitting in the glow of the vanity lamp, staring at the folded napkin on the table. My hands didn't shake. My eyes didn't water. I was past that stage of pain. Instead, I reached for a small brown notebook from the drawer, my father's old ledger. Inside were years of handwritten notes, dates, receipts, account transfers. Every transaction that had mysteriously vanished from his records was marked with the same initials. M and T. Mom and Tessa. Dad hadn't known I'd found this before he passed. He'd written, if anyone ever questions this, show them. But I hadn't shown anyone. Till now. The next morning I woke to a quiet house. The air smelled of coffee and paper. Daniel had already left for work and the sunlight streamed softly through the curtains. I sat at the kitchen table, opened the ledger again and slid the folded napkin beside it. Two symbols of the same legacy, one of deceit, one of proof. I turned to a blank page and began writing. Every memory. Every small theft. Every unspoken cruelty. It wasn't anger guiding my pen. It was precision. Because revenge, I've learned, doesn't start with rage. It starts with record keeping. By noon my phone rang. I stared at the screen, debating whether to answer. Finally I did. Her voice was calm, too calm. You need to come by this evening. We need to talk privately. I'm busy. Don't play games with me, she snapped. You embarrassed us last night. If you don't want that letter to cause real damage, you'll fix this. I smiled faintly. Mom, that letter doesn't cause damage. It reveals it. She went silent. Then hung up. I set the phone down. For the first time her silence didn't make me anxious. It made me certain. That evening I lit a candle beside Dad's old photo on the mantel. His eyes looked as kind as ever, like he still knew more than he'd said. "I didn't forget your promise," I whispered. "I just waited until the right day to keep it." The flame flickered and for a moment I imagined him nodding. I placed the ledger beside his frame, a quiet symbol of closure. But deep down I knew this wasn't over. Last night had shaken their pride. Tonight would shake their foundation. Because when you spend years being quiet, your silence becomes sharper than their cruelty. And I was ready to cut clean. The next morning I drove to my father's old law office. The same narrow street, the same brass nameplate dulled by dust. I hadn't been there since his funeral. The secretary recognized me immediately. "He kept a file under your name," she said softly, almost like she'd been waiting for me to ask. She disappeared into the back room and returned with a brown envelope sealed in wax. The handwriting on the front stopped my breath. His. I didn't open it there. I just held it close, feeling the weight of everything he must have known. My father had always been cautious, the kind of man who sensed storms before clouds even formed. He must have seen this one coming. At home I set the envelope on the table and made tea. Steam curled up like a signal to no one in particular. When I finally broke the seal, my hands didn't shake. Inside was a single letter and a set of signed bank authorizations, proof of account transfers made years ago. Each transaction had one thing in common: my mother's signature beside Tessa's. Money borrowed from Dad's medical fund, from my savings bonds, even from the trust account meant for emergencies. There was also a smaller note clipped to the back. My father's handwriting again. "If she ever tries to erase what's yours, show her this. She'll understand loss then." I smiled faintly. He hadn't meant revenge. But he had left me the map for it. By evening I had already contacted Mr. Hull, the same lawyer who'd handled Dad's estate. He remembered me. "Your father said you were the only one with his patience," he chuckled on the phone. "I learned it from him," I said. We met the next day. He reviewed the documents quietly, his brows lifting once, then again. "This is thorough. You have enough here to reclaim everything under your name." "I don't want to reclaim," I said. "I want them to realize what it feels like when security disappears overnight." He studied me for a moment, not judging, just understanding. "You'll need to act precisely." "I always do." The plan wasn't built overnight. It had been forming for years. In silence, in observation, in all the spaces where they thought I wasn't paying attention. Mom and Tessa lived off the illusion of control. They thrived on ownership, on being seen as untouchable. So that's exactly where I aimed. The next few days I visited the bank where our family accounts were held. The manager, Mr. Dawson, was polite but hesitant when I showed him the authorizations. After a moment he nodded slowly. "Yes, ma'am. These are still active. Your name remains primary on 2 of them." My father's foresight again. He'd made me co-signer. They just never noticed. "Freeze both accounts temporarily," I said calmly, "pending a review for misuse." He blinked. "Will that alert the others?" I smiled. "Eventually." That evening I drove past my mother's house. Lights glowed inside. Laughter floated faintly through the open kitchen window. Tessa's voice carried the loudest, confident, careless. For a moment I sat in the car and simply listened. To anyone else it would have sounded like happiness. To me it sounded like the calm before understanding runs out. I didn't knock. I didn't need to. My presence wasn't required for what came next. 2 mornings later my phone buzzed relentlessly. "Mom, did you mess with the accounts? The bank's saying something's wrong." "Tessa, why are my cards declining? What did you do?" I let the messages pile up while I stirred sugar into my coffee. The taste was sharper today, victory always is. When the calls began I answered none of them. Finally a single text from Mom arrived. "Come here. Now." I replied with one word: busy. By evening the knocking began, loud, impatient, familiar. I opened the door. Both of them stood there, faces pale, anger simmering beneath their perfume. Mom shoved a bank letter toward me. "They said you froze the accounts. Are you insane?" I glanced at the papers. "No. Just precise." Tessa stepped forward. "You think you can ruin us because of that letter at the wedding? You embarrassed yourself, not us." I leaned against the doorframe, calm. Then why do you look ruined? Her mouth opened, then shut again. Mom tried a softer tone. We can fix this quietly, sweetheart. Just sign them back to me. You don't understand the complications this causes. I understand perfectly, I said. You're not used to hearing the word no. I could almost hear my father's voice in that moment. Fairness doesn't ask for forgiveness. They followed me inside uninvited. Tessa began pacing, muttering under her breath. Mom sat at the table, rubbing her temples. You've always been dramatic, she said finally. Everything had to mean something to you. Everything did, I replied. Especially when it was taken. She glared up. Your father spoiled you with sentimentality. You never learned how the real world works. And you never learned that stealing isn't survival. For a second I thought she might slap me. But she didn't. She just stood up, gathering her purse. You'll regret this, she said coldly. I smiled faintly. You said that last time. How's regret working out so far? That night I pulled out the brown ledger again. Every transaction now matched with a digital record. Step by step the trap was tightening, and all using documents they'd signed themselves. I called Mr. Hall the next morning. Proceed with the notice, I said. Are you sure? He asked. Yes. They built this mess. I'm just shining a light on it. By afternoon, 2 official letters were sent. One to my mother's address, one to Tessa's apartment. Legal notice of pending investigation for financial misconduct, with their signatures as evidence. It wasn't a lawsuit. Not yet. It was pressure, elegant, silent, effective. 3 days later I found Mom waiting outside my gate. She looked smaller somehow, her hair undone, her confidence cracked. You can't do this, she said. People will find out. They'll talk. They already do, I said quietly. Only now they're talking about the truth. She took a shaky breath. I did it for her. She needed help. And you used Dad's money to buy her comfort. I kept this family together. I met her eyes. No. You kept it chained to your pride. She pressed her hand against the gate. You'll destroy us. I shook my head. No, Mom. I'm setting us even. Her lips trembled, and for a moment she looked older than I'd ever seen her. You sound like him. I finally listened to him, I said. That evening the mail brought me another envelope, this one from the bank. A short note confirming the accounts had been frozen pending verification. Attached was a smaller sheet, a list of third-party withdrawals. Every single one led to Tessa's name. I stared at it for a long time. Then folded it carefully, placing it beside my father's letter. Proof. Layer after layer. I wasn't destroying them. I was letting their own greed do it for me. 2 weeks passed. Tessa called from an unknown number, her voice breaking. They're investigating, do you understand? Mom could lose everything. She already lost the only thing that mattered, I said. What's that? Pie silence. He started crying. Please just stop. We'll fix it. I'm not stopping anything, I said. You are. The line went dead. That night I sat by the window looking out at the dark sky. The world felt still. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang, slow, steady, like an ending disguised as peace. I thought of my father again. How he must have known this pain would come, how he left me the tools to defend myself without losing my grace. I whispered, I did it your way, Dad. Quietly. The wind brushed the curtains, soft as an answer. The next morning I received another message. Not from them this time, but from the lawyer. They've requested a private meeting. They're desperate to negotiate. I folded the phone into my palm and smiled. Not triumphantly, just peacefully. Every trap, after all, works best when they believe they still have control. I wrote back, tomorrow. At the old house. Because some lessons needed to be taught where they began. That night I ironed a plain white blouse, simple and neat. No jewelry, no bright colors. I wanted to look exactly as they remembered me. Quiet, harmless, forgettable. Let them underestimate me one last time. As I set the blouse aside, I noticed my reflection in the mirror. Calm eyes, faint lines, a softness hardened into certainty. Years ago I'd have prayed for their approval. Tonight I prayed only for clarity. They built their kingdom with deceit. Tomorrow I'd let them watch it collapse. Brick by brick, paper by paper, all signed in their own handwriting. Tomorrow came sooner than I expected. The morning light spilled through the curtains like a quiet witness. I dressed slowly, the plain white blouse I'd ironed the night before, soft beige skirt, small gold earrings. No perfume, no jewelry meant to impress. Just the woman they'd spent a lifetime underestimating. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. Not because I'd changed, but because I'd finally stopped apologizing for who I was. The calm on my face wasn't peace, it was power without noise. I left the house with the folder in my hand, my father's ledger, the bank documents, the legal notices. Each paper a piece of their own handwriting, each line a reflection of what they had done. The old house stood still when I arrived. Its white paint had faded to the color of unkept promises. I hadn't stepped inside since my father's funeral. The gate creaked open like it remembered me, and the smell of dust and old roses hit me the moment I walked through the door. They were already waiting in the living room. Mom sat stiffly on the sofa, her posture perfectly arranged for authority. Tessa was beside her, arms crossed, eyes red from crying but still defiant. "Close the door," Mom said. Her voice was thin, too controlled to be steady. I shut it gently. "You wanted this meeting. I'm here." Mom looked at the folder in my hand. "You're not going to need that." "I think I will," I said quietly, sitting across from them. Tessa started first. "This has gone too far. The bank, the lawyer, they're saying fraud. Mom could be charged." I looked at her calmly. "And whose signature is next to hers?" She hesitated. She didn't mean. She meant every word and every number. Mom's hand slammed the table. "Enough. We are family. You think this makes you strong? Ruining us." "No," I said softly. "It makes me even." Silence stretched. The old clock ticked somewhere down the hallway, loud, rhythmic, merciless. Mom leaned forward, voice trembling with the kind of desperation that hides behind pride. "We can fix this quietly. Withdraw the complaint. I'll transfer everything back, I promise." Her words sounded rehearsed, like all the other promises that came only when the audience changed. "I didn't file a complaint," I said. She blinked. "What?" "I only asked the bank for verification. They discovered the discrepancies themselves. They'll decide what happens next." Tessa paled. "So you're just, what? Letting them destroy us?" I looked at her, then at Mom. "No. I'm letting you destroy yourselves." Mom stood up, pacing, her heels clicking like gunshots across the wooden floor. "Your father would be ashamed of you." My voice stayed calm. "He's the reason you're sitting here today." Her steps stopped. I placed the folder on the table and opened it slowly. The papers fanned out. The ledger, bank transfers, Dad's will, the signatures. "Do you remember the day he called you into his office?" I asked quietly. "He told you to stop touching his accounts. You promised him you would." She said nothing. "I found his letter," I continued. "He knew you'd break that promise. He left proof for me, not to punish you but to protect me. I'm just finishing what he couldn't." Her breath caught. "You're lying." I slid the letter toward her. "Then read it." Her fingers shook as she lifted the page. The handwriting was unmistakably his, steady, precise, heartbreakingly kind. When she reached the end, her shoulders sagged. The paper trembled in her hand. Tessa leaned closer. "What does it say?" Mom didn't answer. Her lips pressed together until the color drained from them. I looked at my sister. "It says he left everything under my name until you both learned what honesty looks like." Tessa laughed bitterly. "He wouldn't do that." "He did," I said. "You were just too busy spending to notice." For the first time, neither of them spoke. The silence felt heavy, not the kind that asks for forgiveness but the kind that accepts defeat. Mom sank slowly back into the sofa. Her eyes glistened but the tears never fell. "I thought I was doing what was best for us." "No," I said softly. "You were doing what made you feel powerful." Tessa muttered, "We didn't mean to hurt you." "You never had to mean it," I said. "You just had to stop." The words came out quietly but they landed like stones in still water. I gathered the papers back into the folder. "Everything in this file will go to Mr. Hall tomorrow. He'll transfer all assets back under my name. After that I'll close the accounts. You'll be free, from me, from him, from all of it." Mom's voice cracked. "And what about family?" I looked around the old room. The same furniture, the same curtains, everything frozen in time except the people inside it. Family, I said, should have been the one thing you couldn't buy or steal. For a moment I almost reached for her hand. But then I remembered the napkin. You'll regret crossing blood. I left my hand where it was. You'll hate yourself for this one day, Mom whispered. No, I said. One day you'll understand it. I stood, the chair legs scraping lightly against the floor. I'm not asking for an apology. I just came to end the story. As I turned toward the door, Mom's voice wavered behind me. He loved you more, you know. That's why She stopped herself. I looked back at her. That's why you what? He swallowed. That's why I took it out on you. For the first time her eyes met mine. No disguise, no mask, just exhaustion. I nodded slowly. And that's why I forgave you long before you asked. Her mouth opened slightly but no sound came. I walked out without another word. Outside the air smelled of rain. Clouds gathered low over the house, dark and heavy. As I stepped off the porch, a single drop hit my cheek. Cold, clean, grounding. The car engine hummed softly when I started it. Through the windshield, I could still see the faint silhouette of them in the window. Two women who had built their power on my silence, now standing in its aftermath. I didn't feel joy. Just quiet balance. Back home, the sky finally broke open. Rain drummed gently on the roof as I placed the folder on the fireplace mantel beside Dad's photograph. You always said fairness takes time, I whispered. It did. I lit a candle, its small flame dancing beside his smile. The house smelled of rain and wax. Simple, pure, peaceful. For years I thought revenge would taste bitter. It didn't. It tasted like freedom. Later that night, Daniel came into the room, drying his hair with a towel. You look lighter, he said. I put something back where it belonged. He smiled, unaware of the depth behind my words. Then maybe it's time to rest. Maybe, I said softly. Rest feels different when it's earned. He kissed my forehead and turned off the light. The room went dark except for the candle's glow. I sat there a while longer watching the flame. It flickered once, then stilled, steady, unwavering. I thought of my mother and sister. I wondered if they were sitting in that big house now, realizing how quiet it could feel when pride ran out of words. I didn't need to know. Some lessons didn't need witnesses. I closed my eyes and whispered one final thought to myself, not out of triumph but truth. Justice wears no crown. It doesn't need one. Because in the end, power isn't loud. It's the sound of a woman walking away and never looking back. If this story touched something inside you, hit subscribe and stay with me. Every week, we uncover another quiet story of betrayal, justice, and a woman who finally takes back her power.